Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and this is Dear Profiler Pat, a place where you can ask questions and I'll give you my answers. If you'd like me to answer one of your questions, please do send an email to profilerpatbrown@gmail.com and put in the subject line Dear Profiler Pat and ask your question. It will be anonymous, so I'm not going to use your name in it. But believe me, your questions are really very interesting, and often the answers are not only about your question, but about a larger uh, part of life than just one segment of it. It's quite interesting, actually, and that's going to be true for this question that I'm going to answer. Before I get started, please do remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and check my playlists so you can find out what area of life you want to get an answer to, and hit the bell for notifications. Okay, to the question. Dear Pat Brown, my grandson is 10 years old and is very curious about liquor. He hates bubbly drinks and asked me if beer and wine is bubbly. I told him alcohol is very dangerous and unhealthy, and then I went into your kids are stupid and adults are crazy lecture. That is somewhere in one of my videos, you'll hear something like that. Anyway, question. The question I have is, should parents be drinking wine or beer, etc., in dinner in front of their kids? I never saw my parents drink anything except on Passover. Is it a do what I say, not what I do thing? Yeah, that is a good question, isn't it? I think this is a fantastic question. Now, I want to say this. It's not just, should I drink alcohol in front of my children? It can also be, should I smoke cigarettes in front of my children and grandchildren? Should I vape in front of my kids or grandchildren or other people's kids? Not just your kids, other people's children. Should I smoke weed in front of them? Should I let them know I take certain medications? Should I wear low-cut shirts if you're a lady with big boobs? Should I show my boobs off in front of the children? Should I watch certain movies in front of the children? Should I use swear words in front of the children? What is my responsibility as an adult in front of children to behave in a certain way so that I don't influence the kids badly? Well, I want to start by saying this. If you're uncomfortable doing something in front of the children, at least it starts in your head. Hey, maybe I shouldn't do this. Probably you shouldn't do that. You're uncomfortable for a reason. You believe for whatever you're doing is probably not the finest behavior in the world. Cussing is, not overly attractive. We do it a lot these days, more so than when I grew up. When I grew up, I never heard my parents say a swear word. And I certainly never said a swear word in front of them. And then time has gone on. And I have to say, sometimes I say swear words in front of my grown children. And they say swear words in front of me. And I'm like, what the heck happened? I'm like, and I look at my own children. I say, why would they say those words in front of me, their mom? Now, when they were growing up, I didn't say those words. But somehow now that they're adults, they're saying those words in front of me. Something I would have never done. I never did until my parents died in their 90s. I never heard a swear word from me because I thought you don't do that in front of your parents. There are a lot of things I wouldn't do in front of my parents and my kids do in front of me because we are a changed world. They're not the same as they used to be. So we have a lot more relaxed behavior between adults and children these days, both when children are growing up and as adults. A lot more relaxed behavior. Is this good? Well, I don't think it's necessarily excellent. That's for sure. And I think, yes, as adults, we have responsibilities to be somebody children can look up to and not think, oh, look at my mom, look at my dad, look at my grandma, look at my grandpa, or look at my Girl Scout leader, look at what she's acting like. I see her guzzling down beer over there. I see my dad just using the F word every 3 seconds. I see my parents watching R-rated movies. I see them get drunk. I see them smoking cigarettes. So, hey, if I see adults doing this around me, well, they're likely not going to put you as high on a pedestal as you might like to be, or you should be. So I can't recommend and say it's perfectly fine to do things in front of your kids, grandkids, and other people's kids and grandkids that aren't the finest representation of adults. I mean, I think one should be around children, somebody the children can look at and go, oh, this is a good way to be. This is someone I definitely can look up to. Look at the fine behavior. I mean, everybody needs that in their life, especially from the adults in their life. Now, having said that, if you don't do any of those things in front of your children, will they grow up to never do those things? And my answer to that is, well, that doesn't necessarily work that way. And I'll tell you what. When I was married, raising our kids, my husband and I did not drink. We did not have much alcohol in our lives at all. I think occasionally my husband might have had a beer, like on really, really rare occasions. And maybe if a friend came over, maybe there was a bottle of wine, maybe. But I don't remember any mixed drinks in the house, cocktails, strong liquor. We didn't have a liquor cabinet. I mean, my parents did have a liquor cabinet, but it was locked, and it was only opened once a year because my father had to give a party for the. He was in government. He had to give this party once a year. He had dressed in a suit. My mother put a fancy, the cocktail party thing. He hated it. She hated it, but they had to do it once a year, and they brought out the liquor for that. But they weren't drinkers. The most I ever saw. I don't think I ever saw my father drink. My mother only ever drank wine once a week with spaghetti. She drank a glass of red wine. I smelled it, thought it was the worst thing ever because she had bad taste. So she had Gallo wine in that big jug. And I thought, oh, wine is disgusting. And so when I grew up, I never touched liquor growing up. When I became even of an age to drink, I wasn't into drinking anything. I went over to before I went to Denmark, somebody said, hey, Pat, you should have a Danish beer, because you're going to Denmark and they drink beer there. And I said, I don't drink beer. And they gave me a beer and I thought I tasted it and went, ugh. And then I got to Denmark and I tasted their beer and went, oh, I started drinking beer in Denmark. And then I learned to like wine. But my parents, I didn't see it from my parents, and my children, when we were a family, it wasn't part of our lives. Drinking was not part of our lives. And I also homeschooled my kids. So they weren't going off to, teenage parties and slipping out and, things going on through the school. None of that was happening because my kids were homeschooled. We had a homeschool group. And we were going to church. We had, everything was we lived a very clean life. My kids, my kids growing up, and my kids became adults, and all three of them drink alcohol. And they drink way more alcohol than I would like to see. And they became part of the culture around them. The culture around them these days is a culture of drinking shots, strong liquor, not light stuff. A lot of wine for the ladies, but off IPAs now instead of Bud Light. And just a tremendous amount of shots. They go to a bar and they just chuck down the shots, which I think is very unhealthy, very dangerous, especially for women, because their bodies, they take so many shots that they lose control of everything. And they can make themselves a victim of somebody else. For a lot of guys drinking like that, crash the cars. Are dangerous on the road. And of course, now if they keep that up, doing this excess drinking, not necessarily every day, but on these binge type drinking things, which we see kids doing. I say kids, I mean teens, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds. 40-year-olds, they might have liver damage over the years and are just terribly unhealthy. And yet, all three of my kids drink drink a lot like the people around them, and they didn't learn that in the home. But it was the culture that they ended up in after they left home. And so the environment around us does have an effect, obviously. We didn't use, my husband and I didn't use swear words when they were growing up. There was no F word ever used in the home. But yet when they went out in society, that where there was so much cussing going on, it became part of their vocabulary. And then they started, not minding that I was there because kids and adults in the same room were doing that. So I saw those things happen that didn't happen in my home. So yeah, I think we should, in our own home and in other people's homes with children and in public with children, I think, yes, we ought to live up to being good adults, especially around kids. I mean, it seems wrong to me that we would want to behave in any way that children would look at and think that's a good way to behave. So we shouldn't encourage that in children growing up. So they see that as a way of life. So does that mean you can never have a glass of wine with dinner? No, I'm not saying that. But the question is how often, how much, under what circumstances. And there are things that just, my grandmother was a heavy smoker. There was not one person in my family who smoked except my grandmother from Germany. And she smoked Winston cigarettes. And my father would buy packages, those big, long packages, take them to her at Christmas. And when I went and stayed with her, she smoked nonstop. She was a heavy smoker. And you get the smoke in your clothes and it's like, ah. But that was my grandmother. And yet, for some reason, because she was the only one who did that, I didn't grow up thinking I should smoke. Because I didn't see any other adults doing that. So sometimes if it's a one person who has that habit, it's not so influential as when you see the whole society around you have that habit. A lot of people, when they get into certain jobs, will find that they become involved in certain less healthy habits because of the people they work with. For example, I think in a lot of police work, there's a lot of cigarette smoking in police work, a lot of drinking. And so once one becomes part of the law enforcement culture, maybe it's a stress of the job and sitting around a lot, that people end up doing that a lot. So there are different groups where once you're an adult that you will then sort of mold into that way of life. And so we at home can provide the best environment we can provide. We as adults can provide the best environment we can provide. But we also have to be aware of the society around us. And when the kids grow up, what part of society are they going to be a part of? And can we do anything about it at that point? And then probably the answer to that is no. We cannot. We can guide our children to the best part of society we can, so that if we're raising children, grandchildren, to make sure they pick the best friends, that they don't get involved in the bad teenage stuff that goes on, that they read good books, that they do kinds of volunteer work that's excellent, that they take up hobbies that are excellent. If you're a horseback rider, you're playing sports and that sport is not conducive to drinking and drugging and all that stuff, that's a good thing. Keep them away from that because the people in that sport won't be doing it. So you certainly want to get them involved in as many things as possible so that doesn't become a way of life for them at a young age. So that's the best I think we can do. And then as a society, it would be nice if we cleaned up our act, but there's a lot of, society has, there's cultures in society and there's subcultures in society. And depending on where we live and work, we may be part of one culture or a particular subculture. I think many times the subculture is one we choose more than the general culture. So if we're hooking up in a subculture which isn't healthy, that the children are going to be around an unhealthy subculture, then we as adults are probably not doing the best by the children, and neither are the other adults around doing the best by the children for part of that kind of a subculture. So we just have to, I would just say as adults, we have to be as responsible as we can be, do the best we can to act right. And we should be proud of the way we act. Why would we want to act in a way that we shouldn't be proud of? And that the kids shouldn't be proud of us. They should be proud of us. They should be proud of the adults in their life. And you know, I do remember when my kids were growing up and I was homeschooling, I had a lot of great adults in our life. And my kids thought of them as aunts and uncles. And I was impressed by them because of the effort they were putting out to raise their children and trying to live clean lives. And some of the church people I associated with at the time, and when they were growing up, the same type of thing. Somebody could look at these adults and you could see that they were living as clean a life as possible, and they were being careful what their children watched on TV and what music they listened to. And some people say, oh, that's just too much. But is it too much, or is it providing a fine environment? Now, I think my husband and I did, I think, a pretty good job, because all three of my kids have grown up to be nice people. They're not in prison. They're good members of society. They're kind. They're decent other human beings. So I'm pleased at how they grew up. But I will say, in spite of the homeschooling, the neighborhood, the whole general culture in our area did indeed affect them. And some of the choices they made as they grew up into being free adults, that they were part of that society around them. And so they're a little different than me as far as some of the way we look at life and some of the things we do, because I'm like, wow, where did you learn that? Where did that come from? It's not Dad and me. They're like, well, yeah, but no, Mom, we lived in this neighborhood. I'm like, yeah, that's true. And that's why some of that's part of you, the culture that was around. So, and the final answer, do what you think is what makes you comfortable in front of that child, and don't do what makes you uncomfortable in front of that child. And sometimes that does mean we don't do something that we think, well, it doesn't really bother me that much. I would certainly sit and have wine with my friend. I'd have a beer at the pub. But maybe when the kids are around, I won't do that, or I'll make it a point to say, oh, sometimes I like to have one glass of wine with dinner, like my mom, but do what makes you comfortable. So do things that your children don't go, why do you do that, Grandma? Why do you do that, Grandpa? Or have kids come home to their parents and say, over at Miss Brown's house, she did this, this, and this. And then you wonder why that kid's not allowed over anymore. That could be why. So I think we should obviously be the finest example we can be to our kids. And, we don't have to be perfect, but I think we should be a good example. And all the adults should be good examples. Wouldn't it be nice if all the adults in society were concerned about being good examples? I think we'd be in a lot better shape, don't you? Anyway, those are my thoughts. Put your comments below. And again, do not forget to subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you for the next Dear Profiler Pat. Bye.